My coworker had never done anything like that in the 3 years we had worked together. She was the kind of woman who minded her business, kept her head down, and never got involved in anything that wasn't hers to get involved in. So when she cornered me in the break room that Tuesday morning, checked over both shoulders, and pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm so hard I could feel her hand shaking, I knew something was very wrong. She leaned close enough that I could smell her coffee breath and whispered, "Do not read that here. Go to your car, read it alone, then do exactly what it says." Before I could get a single word out, she walked away like we had never spoken. Like nothing had happened at all. I stood there holding that folded paper, pretending to pour myself a cup of coffee I no longer wanted, and I thought, this is Colleen. Colleen who brought homemade banana bread on Fridays. Colleen who cried at the office Christmas party because someone gave her a candle that smelled like her late mother's kitchen. Colleen who once spent 45 minutes helping me find a parking ticket I had misplaced. That woman did not look afraid of anything. But she had just looked terrified. Before I go any further, I need you to subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes you look at the people around you completely differently. My name is Beth Calloway. I'm 37 years old, and at the time all of this happened, I was a licensed pharmacy technician working at a mid-sized regional hospital in Greenville, South Carolina. I had been there for 6 years, long enough to know where the good vending machines were, which attending physicians were impossible before noon, and which administrators smiled to your face while writing you up behind your back. I knew that place the way you know a house you grew up in. Every creak, every cold draft, every room you never quite trusted. I was also raising my son alone. Caleb had just turned 8 that spring. He was the kind of kid who collected rocks and named them, who could tell you the difference between a woolly bear caterpillar and a banded one, who still held my hand in parking lots, not because I made him, but because he wanted to. He was my whole reason for everything. Every early morning, every double shift, every moment I wanted to quit and didn't. His father had been out of the picture since Caleb was 2. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the slow, quiet kind of leaving where one day you realize the other person was gone long before they actually went. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of my life I thought I was going to have. But I had built something real from what was left, and Caleb was proof of that. So that Tuesday morning when I walked out to the parking garage on the 3rd level, sat in the driver's seat of my 11-year-old Honda, and unfolded that piece of paper, I was not prepared for what I read. Colleen had written in her tight, careful handwriting, "They are falsifying patient mortality data, the Rennick account. You accessed it last Thursday when the system rerouted. They know you saw it. You are on a list. Take Caleb. Leave Greenville by tonight. There is a woman named June. Call this number only from a phone that is not yours." A number was written at the bottom. No area code I recognized. I read it 3 times. Then I sat there in that parking garage for what felt like 10 minutes but was probably 45 seconds, listening to the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of a car alarm somewhere below me. The Rennick account. I did remember that. The previous Thursday, our pharmacy database had been doing its quarterly system migration, and something had glitched during the reroute. I had been trying to pull up a patient's medication reconciliation file, and instead found myself looking at a pharmaceutical account I had never seen. Not a patient file, not a standard vendor account, something different. It had a clinical trial identifier attached to it, a drug name I recognized as a cardiac medication currently in phase 3 trials, and a column of mortality outcomes that did not match anything in the public trial registry I had seen mentioned in our hospital newsletter 3 weeks earlier. The numbers were different, significantly different. I had assumed it was a display error, flagged it internally in the system as a possible data sync issue, and moved on. I had not thought about it again until this moment. Until right now, sitting in my car, reading Colleen's note, I drove home on autopilot. I don't remember any of the turns. I remember pulling into my driveway and sitting there with the engine running for a long moment before I went inside. I called Caleb's school from the landline in my kitchen, the one I kept mostly out of habit, and told them there was a family situation and I would be picking him up early. They said fine. Schools in our district had a policy about not questioning those calls as long as you were on the authorized pickup list. I was the only one on his list. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and looked at the piece of paper again. I did not want to believe it, but something in me already did. Because 6 months earlier, I had overheard two of the hospital's senior administrators arguing in the stairwell between the second and third floor, the one nobody used because the vending machine near the entrance had been broken since February and people had just stopped going that way. I hadn't heard the full conversation, just pieces. The trial numbers won't hold. And then they don't need to hold, they just need to hold long enough. I had told myself it was budget talk. Hospitals were always fighting over numbers. I had let it go. I stopped letting it go. I drove to a CVS 4 miles from my house, bought a prepaid phone with cash, and sat in the parking lot. I dialed a number from Colleen's note. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered, steady and calm in a way that told me she had been expecting this call for a while. Is this Beth? Yes. Good. My name is June Alderman. I'm a patient safety investigator. I've been working on the Rennick trial for 14 months. I need you to listen carefully because I can only say this once, and then this phone number goes dark. She told me the following. Rennick Pharmaceuticals had partnered with our hospital system, one of 4 hospitals in the Southeast participating in the trial, to fast-track FDA approval for a cardiac drug called Velerin. The drug had a serious and potentially fatal interaction with the common blood pressure medication that a significant portion of their trial participants were already taking. The internal mortality data showed a rate nearly 3 times higher than what was being reported to the FDA. Someone inside the hospital's data management team had been systematically altering patient outcome records before they were submitted upward. The people running this were not low-level administrators. They were connected to the pharmaceutical company's executive leadership, and at least one of them had a relationship with a sitting member of the FDA's advisory committee. How many people know about this? I asked. In a position to act on it? Right now? You and me and one other person who is no longer safe. Who? A pause. Your coworker. The one who gave you the note. Something cold moved through me. Is Colleen in danger right now? She flagged herself when she contacted you this morning. They monitor internal communications and physical movement patterns in that building. If she was seen talking to you, they already know. I'm sorry. I asked her what I was supposed to do. She said she needed the original data, not what I had seen during the system glitch, but the complete, unaltered file that existed in a secure partition of the hospital's clinical data server. She said Colleen had managed to copy it to an encrypted drive before the partition was locked behind new access credentials 3 days ago. The drive had been passed to someone who would meet me, but I needed to leave Greenville tonight because by morning they would have a reason to detain me, a disciplinary flag, a medication error allegation, something invented and official looking that would neutralize me legally before I could speak to anyone. Why me? I said. I don't have security clearance. I don't have any authority here. I'm a pharmacy tech. June's voice was quiet when she answered. Because you're the only person in that system whose access log shows an unintentional view of the Rennick partition. That makes you a corroborating witness they can't explain away as an insider with an agenda. You saw it by accident, which means you saw the truth before anyone had time to hide it from you. She gave me an address in Asheville, North Carolina, a motel off I-26, a room number, and a name to ask for at the desk. She told me to arrive before 9 that evening and to bring nothing electronic except the prepaid phone. Then the line went dead. I picked up Caleb from school at 12:30. He came out in his dinosaur backpack looking mildly concerned, because I had never picked him up early before unless he was sick, and he knew he wasn't sick. Are we in trouble? He asked. No, baby. We're going on a trip. Where? Mountains, I said, because it was the truth and because I needed to say something that wasn't terrifying. He buckled his own seatbelt and looked out the window thoughtfully. "Can we see a waterfall?" "Maybe," I said, "if we have time." I drove home, packed 2 bags in under 20 minutes, clothes for both of us, medications, our important documents, cash from the emergency envelope I kept in the back of my closet, and the prepaid phone. I did not take my regular cell phone. I left it on the kitchen counter, turned face up like a decoy. As I was carrying the bags to the car, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. A silver sedan was parked across the street in front of the Hendersons' house. That space was almost never used. The Hendersons had a wide driveway and their guests always parked there. I had never once seen a car sit at that curb. I kept walking. I did not look directly at it. I put the bags in the trunk and helped Caleb into the back seat and pulled out of the driveway as normally as I could. I took the long way to the interstate. 3 extra turns, doubling back once. The silver sedan did not follow. But that did not mean I relaxed. We drove north toward Asheville as the afternoon light turned golden over the Carolina hills, and I kept the radio on low and answered Caleb's questions about cloud formations and whether mountains were actually old volcanoes, and I said some of them were, and he said, "That's kind of scary, but also cool." And I said that was exactly the right way to feel about it. We pulled into the motel just before 8:30. It was the kind of place that had been nicer 30 years ago. The parking lot had potholes and the office had a handwritten sign about checkout time. I went to the desk alone, Caleb waiting in the car, and gave the name June had told me. The man behind the desk looked at me without expression, reached under the counter, and handed me a key card with a room number written in marker on a strip of tape. Room 14 was at the far end of the ground floor. I knocked twice. The man who opened the door was somewhere in his mid-50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of face that had spent a lot of time indoors reading things that kept him up at night. He introduced himself as Warren. He said he was a former FDA compliance officer who had been working with June for the better part of a year after leaving his position when he realized the internal reporting system had been compromised by the very people he was supposed to be reporting to. "Colleen gave you the note this morning," I said. "Where is she now?" Warren took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She was placed on administrative leave this afternoon. They used a medication incident allegation. She's home. She's physically safe for now. But she can't communicate with anyone inside the system without them knowing." I sat down on the edge of the bed. Caleb was in the chair by the window, drawing in the small notebook he always carried. He had his headphones in and was very deliberately not looking at us, which was his way of giving me space when he sensed I needed it. 8 years old and already he could read a room better than most adults. "Tell me what you actually need me to do," I said. Warren opened a laptop. He explained that the encrypted drive Colleen had prepared contained the raw patient outcome data from the Rennick trial, unaltered, time-stamped, and cross-referenced against the falsified data that had been submitted to the FDA. The problem was delivery. June had spent 14 months building a case, but every channel she had tried to use inside the FDA had been slow-walked or quietly buried. The people with access to this data needed to be the ones to release it directly and simultaneously to the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations, the Department of Justice, and 3 specific investigative journalists who had been working independently on pharmaceutical oversight stories. It needed to go out all at once, from a source with clean hands, so that no single point of pressure could suppress it. "Why can't you do it?" I said. "You have the drive." "Because my credentialing has been challenged. My former employer filed a professional misconduct allegation against me 8 months ago. Anything that comes from me gets tied up in that process while their lawyers run out the clock." June is the same. She's known. The moment her name is attached, they file injunctions. "But you..." He looked at me with something that was not quite apology. "You're a credentialed hospital employee with a clean record and an access log that shows you encountered this data by pure system error. Your name attached to this submission is the one they can't discredit before it spreads." I thought about what June had said on the phone. You saw the truth before anyone had time to hide it from you." "How many people have died?" I asked. Warren looked at the screen. "Based on what we've been able to verify independently, we believe 41 trial participants died of cardiac events that may have been directly related to the Velerin interaction. Officially, 11 of those deaths have been logged. The other 30 have been coded as unrelated comorbidities." 30 people. 30 families who had been told something that was not true. 30 families who could not fight for justice because the records had been rewritten before they knew there was anything to fight. I looked at Caleb. He had finished his drawing and was holding it up to the window light, examining it with great concentration. He had drawn a mountain with a waterfall on the side. He had given the waterfall a little rainbow. "Show me where to send it," I said. Warren walked me through it. He was careful and methodical and explained every step without assuming I was technically incompetent, which I appreciated. The submission system was one June had helped build in consultation with a former federal prosecutor, a secure platform that simultaneously filed to multiple recipients with read receipts and time-stamped authentication. Once I initiated it with my credentialed hospital login, the submission would be attributed to me as the originating source. It would include Colleen's encrypted data, Warren's analysis, June's 14-month documentation, and my own access log from the Thursday glitch as corroboration. "Once you send this, there's no taking it back," Warren said. "I know. They will come after your professional license. They will try to tie you to whatever Colleen is currently being accused of. It will be difficult. Will it work?" I said. "Will it actually do something?" He looked at me steadily. "The FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations has been waiting for a clean submission they can act on without getting immediately buried in litigation. Yes, it will work. It will be messy and it will take time, but it will work." I thought of the 30 families, the 30 people who had trusted that the system watching over their medical care was honest. I logged in. I verified my credentials. I attached every file Warren indicated. I read the submission summary once, the way I had been trained to double-check every prescription before it went out. Careful, methodical, because mistakes in this kind of work had consequences. Then I clicked send. The confirmation screen came up immediately. 12 recipients. 12 green check marks appearing one by one as each delivery was verified. I exhaled slowly. Warren closed the laptop. He looked older than he had an hour ago, but also somehow lighter. From the chair by the window, Caleb pulled out one of his earbuds. "Mom, are you okay?" "Yeah, baby, I'm okay. You look like you've been doing something hard." "I have been." He nodded seriously as if this made complete sense. "That's okay. You're good at hard things." I don't know how children know the exact right thing to say. I don't know how he knew that particular sentence was exactly what I needed to hear at that exact moment. But I sat there in that motel room in Asheville, North Carolina, and I cried, not from fear, not from grief, but from the particular kind of release that comes when you have been holding something enormous and you finally set it down. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nothing about this was simple. The FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations opened a formal inquiry within 72 hours of the submission. Rennick Pharmaceuticals initially issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and politically motivated, which is the thing companies say when they know the allegations are neither of those things. 3 investigative journalists published within the same week, each from a different angle: the pharmaceutical side, the hospital data management side, and the FDA oversight side. The simultaneous coverage made it impossible to contain. Velerin's Phase 3 trial was suspended. The FDA placed a clinical hold on the drug. An independent audit of the 4 participating hospital systems was ordered. The data management director at our hospital resigned before he could be suspended. 2 executives at Rennick were placed under federal investigation. The member of the FDA Advisory Committee with ties to the pharmaceutical company was quietly asked to recuse himself from all active decisions and subsequently announced he would not be seeking reappointment. My professional license was challenged. there was a 3-month period where I hired an attorney, a woman named Fran who had handled pharmaceutical whistleblower cases before, and we fought it. The allegation against me was withdrawn when it became clear that pursuing it would require the hospital system to explain in detail exactly why they had wanted to discredit me. They did not want to explain that. Colleen was reinstated. The medication allegation against her was dropped for the same reason. I did not return to that hospital. I transferred my license to a position at a smaller outpatient clinic in Asheville, where Warren knew the pharmacy director and vouched for me. The pay was slightly less, but the mountains were right outside the window every morning, and Caleb had found a trail 2 miles from our new apartment that he walked every single weekend, collecting rocks he hadn't named yet. June Alderman testified before a Senate subcommittee on pharmaceutical oversight in the fall. She's still doing that work. She emails sometimes, updates, mostly, and occasionally a question about something I remember from my time in the hospital database. I answer as completely as I can. I think about those 30 families often. I think about the ones who will eventually learn the truth about what happened to the people they lost. And I think about how complicated that knowledge will be. Grief and anger arriving at the same time, years later, when they thought they had already finished grieving. I think about Colleen in the break room that morning, her hand shaking as she pressed that note into my palm. The courage that must have taken. She could have decided it wasn't her problem. She could have told herself she didn't know enough to be sure. She could have done nothing. She chose not to. I think about the fact that I flagged that account as a potential data sync error. I thought I was doing the smallest, most routine thing. A responsible note in the margin. The kind of thing I had been trained to do. I had no idea that note in the margin would become the thread that unraveled something enormous. Nobody tells you that's how it works. Nobody tells you that the moments that change things are almost never the dramatic ones. They're the small, quiet, careful moments. The moment you choose to say something instead of nothing. The moment you decide the right thing and the easy thing are not the same thing, and you go with the right one anyway, even when the easy thing is right there, so much simpler, so much less frightening. I was not brave. I want to be clear about that. I was terrified the whole time, from that break room to that motel room and through every step of what came after. I was scared of losing my license, scared of losing my incent, scared of what it would mean for Caleb if this went wrong. But I kept thinking about those 30 people, and I could not unknow what I knew. Caleb found a new rock last weekend. A piece of rose quartz about the size of a fist that he found half buried near the creek on his trail. He brought it home, washed it in the kitchen sink, and held it up to the window. He said he was going to name it Hope because it was pink, and pink was a hopeful color, and it had been underground for probably a very long time before someone found it. I told him that was a perfect name for it. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because the next story might feel a lot closer to home than you expect. I've thought a lot about what made any of this possible. Not the submission system, not the encrypted drive, not the 14 months of work June had already done before I ever entered the picture. I mean the very first thing. The thing that started it all. It was a flag in a margin. A small note I typed into a hospital database on a Thursday afternoon because something looked off and I had been trained to say so. I wasn't trying to be brave. I wasn't trying to expose anything. I was doing the smallest, most ordinary part of my job, the part that says when something doesn't look right, you say so. That's all it was. And I think about that a lot because I think we have this idea that doing the right thing looks a certain way. We imagine it's loud. We imagine it's a speech, or a confrontation, or a moment where you stand up in front of people and declare yourself. But that's almost never how it actually works. The moment that changed everything for me was quiet. It happened at a keyboard, alone, in a hospital I had worked in for 6 years. Nobody saw it. Nobody applauded. I didn't even know it mattered. That's what I mean when I say integrity isn't a performance. It's what you do when there's no audience. Colleen had that same quality. She could have looked at what she found and decided it was too big, too dangerous, too far above her pay grade. She could have gone home and slept fine and told herself it wasn't her problem to solve. Instead, she stood in a break room with her hand shaking and pressed a note into my palm and risked everything she had built at that hospital. She made a choice that cost her, and she made it anyway. That is not nothing. That is actually everything. There's a kind of intelligence that doesn't show up on a resume or a performance review. It's the ability to look at a situation clearly, without the fog of what you wish were true or what's convenient to believe, and see it for what it actually is. Warren had it. June had it. Colleen had it. June had it. Colleen had it. And I think I had a version of it that day in the parking garage when I sat in my car and read that note and felt, beneath all the fear, something very clear and very certain settling in. I knew it was real. I didn't talk myself out of it. That clarity, the willingness to trust what you actually see instead of what's easier to believe, that's a form of courage people don't talk about enough. Because it would have been so easy to decide I was overreacting. It would have been so easy to fold that note up, put it in my pocket, and go back inside and say nothing. The fear was real. The stakes were real. I had a son. I had a license. I had a life I had spent years building from very little, but 30 people were dead, and their families didn't know the whole truth. And I could not unknow that. I'm not telling you this because I think I'm exceptional. I'm telling you because I think most people, given the same information and the same moment, would make the same choice. I think most people are better than the systems that count on their silence. I think most people, when it comes down to it, cannot unknow what they know. Caleb named that piece of rose quartz hope. He said it was pink, and pink was a hopeful color. He's 8. He doesn't know what I did or why we moved or what any of the last year really meant. He just knows we live somewhere with mountains now and there's a trail he loves. And his mom seems less tired than she used to be. That's enough. That's more than enough.